When you are using TrueGrid and using dialog boxes to build your commands, you don't need to think about the command syntax. As you get better with TrueGrid, you will start to bypass the dialog boxes, and you will start typing your commands directly into the text box. Or you might copy commands or groups of commands from past TrueGrid command work files, or even from our examples manual. So you will want to understand the syntax of the commands. TrueGrid can accept input from a variety of places. You can view the lesson called Importing and Saving Data for more detailed examples.
You see, TrueGrid has input from a variety of places. It can come from the tsave file, well, a session file with a .tg usually. That's going to be a stream of data, line after line after line. Or you could be typing in commands, or you could copy some text and dump the entire file into the text window. As far as TrueGrid is concerned, data is coming to it in a stream, and it really doesn't care about end of line. So you can place many commands on one line, or alternatively, you could have one command that spans multiple lines. Like I said, TrueGrid just looks at it as a continuous stream of data. End of line means nothing to TrueGrid. Oh, well, there's just a few exceptions, and we're going to get to those exceptions. Well, first of all, the character string can be no longer than 256 characters, which usually no one violates. So you can have very long input lines. Now, one of the exceptions to ignoring end of line is a comment. You can enter a comment into the stream or into your tsave file or session file. It's the letter C followed by a space and then whatever text you want to put in there. And it's not unusual to put lots of comments into your input file as you develop your model. Now that allows you to have a comment that's one line long. And what happens, TrueGrid will ignore that till the end of that line. So that's what I mean when I say this is an exception where TrueGrid does respect the end of line. Now, an alternative is when you have a group of lines. Could be any number of lines, and you can use the curly brackets here, and anything in between will be ignored. So if I were building a complicated model, let's say with 50 or 100 parts, and I decided that part number 27 should be removed, I would put this curly bracket at the beginning of the part and this closing curly bracket at the end of the part. And then TrueGrid would treat it as nothing more than text to be ignored. If you're typing in a command in the text window, when you hit enter, it will then prompt you for the next argument of the command that you started. If you want to get out of a command that you started, you use the escape key. Now, there are many instances in TrueGrid where you have a long list. Well, it doesn't have to be long, but it's arbitrary in length. And what we're showing here as an example is a 2D curve, a polygonal curve, and there's X and Z, X and Z, X and Z, X and Z. And the last one is identified with a semicolon, ending that list, that arbitrarily long list. The semicolon is used like this frequently in many commands. Now, there'll be times when you're not sure if another semicolon is needed or not, because you can have a list embedded in another list, which would require ending it with 2 semicolons. Don't worry about it. If you're not sure, put in the extra semicolon. And if it's not needed, TrueGrid just ignores it. Everywhere that there is a number required by TrueGrid in this stream of data that's being fed to TrueGrid, you can use an algebraic expression. And you have to use square brackets to start and end it. Any number anywhere can be defined by an algebraic expression. Now that includes parameters, and this is the use of a parameter. You see %len. and it means functions that are common to most programming languages. Now, most of this is being taken out of Fortran, but they also, in most cases, work in C. So, for example, we have the arctangent or the nearest integer. Now, you define a parameter with the para command. You give it a variable name. In this case, I used A. And this sets A to be 1.3. And B is set to 2.5. And then D is set to the value of A, that's %A, which is this variable here. When you use that variable, you put a % in front of it. %A divided by the square root of %B, or the value of B. That's an example of how you would use square brackets to supply a number that is required within some command. This is also an example of how the semicolon is used to end an arbitrarily long list. This para command could go on for pages if we had that many parameters. Who would ever want to have that many parameters? We've had customers wanting as much as 20,000 parameters. It's used quite frequently. Now, in the special case, when you want to use a single parameter, you don't even need the square brackets.